we think of glory as simply meaning exalted. If you
Yes.
went to church, Sunday school, and such, and were raised in the Christian tradition, but you found something quite different. And again, it points back to the visitors and their technology. So let's speak for a moment about glory as you see it in the Bible.
So the word glory is a very vague word in the Christian tradition, and in some circles, glory is just a way of saying wow. It's the wow of God. But what did it originally mean? When you look at how the word behaves in the text, you realize that the glory is in the sky and now it's on the ground. The glory was here, now it's in the plain. The glory is now moving across the landscape. The glory is now launched. And the more you look at how the glory behaves, you realize it's an object. And one of the most informative things you can do is, if you can't get to the root meaning of the word, leave it untranslated and then just see what it does. And if you do that with the word kavod, which we translate as glory, you'll realize you're looking at a craft that carries people, that launches and lands. We've got it described by Moses in the book of Exodus, and he talks about it launching and landing vertically, SpaceX style, and being accompanied by a cloud and a fire and shaking the ground when it launches and lands, and how you can't be out in the open when it launches. Well, you and I listen to
Yeah.
that and think, I can picture that. I've
Cape
seen that on the
Canaveral.
TV.
Yeah.
That does sound like SpaceX
Yeah.
or a Saturn V rocket. And there comes a moment when Moses says to the Yahweh character, will you show me your kavod? And that's when the Yahweh character says, you can see it when I launch it, but you can't be out in the open, otherwise it'll kill you. We understand that. I mean, when they launch from Cape Canaveral, the technicians operating that are several miles away behind reinforced concrete. So we totally get what he's saying in that moment. And if anyone's in any doubt that we're talking about technology, Ezekiel describes what it looks like from the inside. So he describes the metallic textures, the transparent texture of the canopy, the sound of the engine when it's switched on, how the rotors move, the shaking of the craft as it takes off, the feeling of the G-force as it lifts off and moves away, how the controls respond to voice commands, the omnidirectional wheels, which he describes in such detail that NASA has a patent on them. By the time you've read that, you realize this
Yeah.
is not some ethereal religious vision being invoked by the word kavod. It's a piece of technology. NASA cannot have a patent on the glory or the spirit of God, which is how it gets translated, kavod and ruach. It has a patent on technology described in such detail that it can be turned into a US patent, which it was in 1974 by Joseph Blumrich.
I found that
So
fascinating.
you find it in those books, and then you realize that other references to glory are actually references to ancient technology. And I love the fact that Ezekiel, once again, we read it, we think we're in a spiritual text, we try and turn it into metaphor, but in fact, he simply told us what he saw.
If you do look at it as a child, it would make perfect sense. Children don't think in terms of metaphor, and yet the churches of the planet have seen to it that looking at it as a child is not really an option for us. We have to look at it in their interpretation to keep this hidden story hidden.
Exactly. I mean, I read Ezekiel when I was 11 years old, before I was a Christian believer. And at 11, it was obvious to me I was reading technology. And then after I became a Christian, it was explained away for me so that I'd see it in spiritual terms. But there's another bit to the Ezekiel story that comes back to the context that this is the technology of a colonizing force, because after he gets flown around in this craft, he is shown a moment of ethnic cleansing where the deputies of Yahweh are going to eliminate any people who are not grieved by the presence of carvings of other powerful ones. Yahweh wants to get rid of them all. And you read that story and you think, how can you identify families who won't grieve over the presence of carvings in the temple? Well, there are cultures on the planet today where if you don't show open grief at the sickness or passing of the national leader, you're going to be in big trouble. And so there will be public displays of grief, which your viewers may have seen on the TV. That's the kind of regime we're talking about. And so any families identified who are not grieving will be gotten rid of using a Keli Mashatau or a Keli Mapasau. And one is a destroying thing, and one is a disintegrating thing. And apparently, 6 individuals equipped with a disintegrating thing can ethnically cleanse an entire district. So again, this is technology, and preachers have to do somersaults to turn that into a story of a loving God and spiritual phenomena, when the writer has just told us at face value there was ethnic cleansing and it was done using advanced technology.
I hope you're enjoying this video, because if you are, there are dozens more like it on my site, all supported by people like you. So if you'd like to keep this work rolling in and join our community, just click on the Patreon button at reginameredith.com. That also gives you access to insider commentary, my live book club, and other live events with special guests. So join in. Thanks.
I was really impressed by what the Roman Catholic Church did in 2009 when Pope Benedict XVI, the most conservative pope in my lifetime, blew me away by calling on the Pontifical Academy of Sciences to discuss the implications of contact with other civilizations, ET civilizations. And when the Pope's spokespeople met the press, they said, not only should we not be surprised that we're in a populated cosmos, but we should be ready to embrace visitors as brothers and sisters, a brother and sister alien. And the reason we shouldn't be surprised, they said, is because it's in the Bible. It's in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And when they said that, that really was an invitation to everybody, not just Roman Catholics, to go back to the Bible and say, what? There are ETs in here, and start finding them. And bravo to them for doing that. But that seemed to be the end of the story. It all went a bit quiet after that. And it's actually quite difficult to find the articles that were written when those spokespeople met the press. I now wonder if they did that because they thought there was going to be a disclosure at that point and they had to get on the front foot.
Yeah.
But something like that needs to happen in the wider church. My estimation is that in every congregation, you've got a range of views, because in every congregation, whatever the doctrine, you will have people who've had experiences that don't fit the mainstream narrative, but they'll know they can't talk about them in church because it doesn't fit in the boxes. Some churches gather on the basis of doctrinal bases. So, a list of 12 fundamental truths. And in that part of the church, the congregation can almost take on a role where they are policing the doctrine of the pastor. And if the pastor departs from the script, it's him who's in trouble. And so that is rather intimidating to a pastor who wants to share information that may be there in the Bible, but is off curricula. It's not one of the fundamental truths. How far can he stretch the thinking of his people before the pastoral relationship breaks? And I think every pastor makes that calculation. Anyone who teaches a congregation is wanting to develop the thought life of the people, but how far can you stretch that before they say, you're going to have to leave because you're now preaching heresy? And I think I respect pastors struggling with that, but at some point we're going to reach a shift in gravity where enough pastors are across this material that they can back each other up. I have contact with very well-known mega pastors in the United States who know what's in my books and reckon it's correct. They know there's paleo contact in the Bible. They know a lot of the Yahweh stories are not God's stories. And I think we're nearing a point where if they stick their necks out and say, have a look at these texts, people, see what you think is going on, and give their people permission to see what they're seeing in the texts, to bring the questions they've had for 20 years. Then I think they can support each other in moving the conversation forward. We're not quite there yet. Pastors are still very isolated who've reached this territory, but I think we're not far from the point, and we're being helped by everything that's in the media at the moment about contact with ET technology, and the Pentagon having had a unit investigating UFO crash retrievals for 70 years. The more that's in the press, the easier it is for people in the churches to have conversations, and it's easier for pastors to say, yes, it's right, we should be talking about this because this is all in the Bible. And you don't have to say any more. People can join the dots, but I think we're nearing that point.
And yet you say that those articles from the Catholic Church seem to have gone dark a bit. And so then we look back, and I want to bring this up. You wrote about this in your book. In the 1600s, the Presbyterian minister, Robert Kirk, he wrote, and I wrote down, he wrote a book called The Secret Commonwealth. And he was talking about this is in the 1600s, a non-human layer of governance ruling Project Earth. Now, if you get to the military, I did an interview with John Warner IV. His father was a senator, several terms senator, and he was also Secretary of Defense at one point. And so he used to hang out at the Pentagon with his dad, do his homework there, and was allowed to approach anyone and ask anything he wanted. And he recounted a story where he spoke to an elderly admiral and said, what is it true that we have contact with ETs? And he said, basically, son, look around the halls here. They run the show. Now, this is from the military, right? So that, I'm just saying that, meaning the colonizers appear to still be present, still to have a hidden hand. And the fact that this breakthrough that happened in the Catholic Church didn't really mushroom and go further, in fact, went kind of dark, would show that the hidden hand is probably still exerting itself within that church. And I would guess in general, within the governments of the world, the Russians know about it. They say, we can't say anything. We can't do anything. We're not running the show. So how do we take this presence of these colonizers biblically and then confront the modern problem that they haven't left and that we need to break free?
Yes, that's right. And that story is in the Bible, because there is a moment in 1 Samuel chapter 8 when the people decide they don't want the non-human layer to be governing Project Earth anymore. And they tell the Yahweh character, we are not going to live in fear any longer. We're not going to serve you. They've realized that if they speak as one voice, they disempower the more powerful entity. And it's almost reached the point where the terror that Yahweh has exerted has lost its purchase. And the people are saying, if we confront him, what can he do? He can only kill us. And the terror has lost its power. Can't kill us all. What would be the point? They know that they can get the situation to pivot. They dismiss Yahweh and choose a human king. But then the story rolls on and says, Yahweh may have disappeared from visibility, but he's actually still calling the shots from behind closed doors. And that's how the stories play out. And so our ancestors have given us a story of covert government, a covert non-human layer in geopolitics. And it was through reading those stories that I came to the view that the non-human layer has never gone away, that it is part of our uber government, our covert government. You mentioned Robert Kirk. He came to that conclusion via a different route, and that was through listening to the lived experience and ancestral narratives of the Celtic peoples living in and around Aberfoyle in Scotland in the 1500s and early 1600s. And as he studied the local experience, he came to that same conclusion. There's a non-human layer to the governance of Project Earth. And there is contact at a covert government level. He published a book about that in the early 1600s.
Amazing.
Now, Presbyterian, Christian, minister, 1600s, that's a very conservative world and a very conservative kind of guy. except that's where the data led him, and he had the courage to publish it. It's been in print ever since. So now we come to the present day when somebody like Hayam Ashed steps forward, Christmas 2020. I should say who he is. He was the brigadier general who for 28 years was Israel's chief of space security. Mm-hmm. So it was his job to know if we're in contact, if there's any threat. A very senior position. He also presided over their space programming, the launch of their technology into space. Christmas 2020, he steps forward and says, on the basis of his privileged information, 28 years in that job, his understanding is that we have been in contact for a very long time with a number of other spacefaring civilizations, but that they have chosen not to self-disclose until we, the general public, have a better understanding of what space is and what spaceships are. And then he went further. He said that it's not just contact, it's collaboration. The USA has collaboration going on. Israel has collaboration going on. Probably other world powers too. They are very interested in planet Earth. They're doing research here, and we have agreements with them for that to happen. Now, this should have been mind-blowing to the whole world. This should have stayed in the news cycle for months and months and months, but it didn't. But if you pay attention to what he's just said, he is only repeating what Robert Kirk said in the 1600s. He's only repeating what our ancestors said thousands of years ago and even wrote into the pages of the Bible if we read it slowly enough. So the same story has been there for generation after generation. So the picture is the same. Our ancestors didn't just write to tell us what happened to them. They're helping us understand the world as it is and how to live in the world. And I think one of the positive take-homes of what's in the Bible is that we have friends in high places, that it's not an all dark, Mars attacks, invasion of the body snatchers kind of picture, that in the Galactic Federation, as Hayam Ashed calls it, we have allies. We have some here who love human beings and who've loved us for a very long time and who want to nurture us, and they are on that council. And I have hope for humanity's future because of that help.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you might also want to consider joining Patreon, which allows me to keep all of this content free and available to everyone. And if you're looking for like-minded souls, you might also enjoy my online community called Our Neighborhood. Links to join are in the description.